The dinner plates had been cleared, leaving only the faint, unsettled hum of the dishwasher and the drumming of Seattle rain against the panoramic window. Ethan watched his wife, Claire, scroll through her phone with a smile that was too soft, too private for a woman sitting next to her husband of 8 years. It wasn't the affair that shattered the silence of the room. It was the calmness with which she finally looked up and said, "He's not just a friend, Ethan. He's who Lily really belongs to." The secret wasn't that she had loved someone else. It was that she had been erasing Ethan from their daughter's history, day by day, right under his nose. If the quiet unraveling of a marriage and the heavy price of secrets is something that resonates with you, stay with me. There are truths in this story that we often feel but rarely dare to speak aloud. The rain in Seattle didn't wash things clean. It just made everything gray and slick, sealing the city inside a wet glass dome. Ethan Caldwell stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of their downtown penthouse, watching the headlights blur on I-5. The apartment was quiet, possessed of that sterile, curated silence that his wife, Claire, loved so much. Ethan. Her voice was soft, devoid of the jagged edges that usually preceded an argument. He turned. Claire was sitting on the edge of the beige sectional, her hands folded in her lap. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at a spot on the rug, a posture of rehearsed vulnerability. "Is Lily asleep?" Ethan asked, loosening his tie. The knot felt suddenly tight. A noose of silk he'd been wearing since 7 a.m. "She's out. She had a long day at the studio with me," Claire said. She finally looked up. Her eyes were dry, clear, and terrifyingly calm. "We need to talk. I can't do this performance anymore." Ethan walked over to the armchair opposite her, the leather creaking as he sat. "Performance?" "Claire, we're tired. It's been a long quarter for both of us. If this is about the vacation—" "It's not about a vacation," she cut in. "It's about Julian." The name hung in the air, sucking the oxygen out of the room. Julian, the artist, the man Claire had dated in grad school, the one that got away, the man she had recently hired to commission a piece for her gallery. Ethan had met him twice, a man who smelled of turpentine and arrogance, who looked at Claire with a familiarity that made Ethan's skin crawl. "What about him?" Ethan asked, his voice dropping an octave. "I've been seeing him," Claire said. No stutter, no tears, just a statement of fact. "For 6 months. But that's not the main thing." Ethan felt a numbness spread from his chest to his fingertips. He looked at the wedding photo on the mantel, then back to the woman who was systematically dismantling his life. "You're cheating on me, and you think that's not the main thing?" "It's not just cheating, Ethan. It's correcting a mistake." She took a breath, steeling herself. "Julian isn't just my lover. He's Lily's father." The world tilted. The hum of the refrigerator, the rain against the glass, the beat of his own heart. Everything stopped. "What?" The word was a whisper, a ghost of a sound. "I did the test last week. I always suspected deep down. The timing. It was right around when we had that break before the wedding. I saw him then." Claire leaned forward, her face earnest, pleading for him to understand her twisted logic. "She has his eyes, Ethan. She has his artistic temperament. She needs him. She needs her real father." Ethan stood up. His legs felt heavy, like they were moving through deep water. He walked to the hallway that led to Lily's room. He could see the faint glow of her nightlight, the shadow of the stuffed bear he had bought her when she was 2. He remembered the nights he walked the floor with her when she had colic. He remembered the scraped knees, the bedtime stories, the way she squeezed his hand when she was scared. "I am her father," Ethan said, his voice shaking for the first time. "You raised her," Claire corrected gently, as if explaining a difficult concept to a child. "And I'm grateful. But you're not him. Julian wants to step up. He wants to be a family. We want to be a family." She stood up and walked toward him, stopping just outside his reach. "I don't want a messy divorce, Ethan. I don't want lawyers tearing us apart. I think it's best if you move out. Tonight. Let us settle in. Let Lily get to know him without the confusion." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the beautiful architecture of her face, the woman he had built a life around, and realized the foundation had been rotten for years. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for him to be erased. He didn't scream. He didn't throw the vase of lilies on the table. He simply felt the cold, hard snap of something vital breaking inside his chest. "Her real father?" Ethan repeated, the words tasting like ash. "Yes," Claire whispered. Ethan turned away from the hallway, away from the sleeping child who was his entire world, and walked toward the guest room where his luggage was stored. "Fine," he said, his voice dead. "You want reality, Claire? You can have it." The guest room closet smelled of cedar and disuse. Ethan pulled down the large black Rimowa suitcase, the one they had bought for their honeymoon in Tuscany, and opened it on the bed. The sound of the zipper tearing through the silence was violent, a mechanical scream in the quiet apartment. He moved with a terrifying efficiency. He didn't pack clothes, he packed armor, charcoal suits, crisp white shirts, the heavy wool coat he would need for a Tokyo winter. He didn't look at the casual wear, the hoodies he wore to the park with Lily, the soft flannels for movie nights. Those belonged to a man who no longer existed. Claire had retreated to the master bedroom, likely texting Julian, likely planning the new arrangement of furniture now that the obstacle was removing himself. Ethan paused, his hand hovering over his nightstand drawer. He pulled out his passport. Beneath it was a business card he had kept for 3 months, an embossed card from the firm's international director. The Tokyo transfer. The senior lead architect position for the Shibuya project. Everyone had told him he was crazy to turn it down, but he had chosen Seattle. He had chosen drive-offs to school and ballet recitals. He pulled out his phone. The screen seemed too bright in the dim room. He found the draft email he had never deleted. Subject, Tokyo relocation offer. He didn't type a new explanation. He simply backspaced over the polite refusal he had written weeks ago and typed, "I accept. I can fly out tomorrow." Sent. It was done. The anchor was cut. Ethan zipped the bag shut. He had 2 suitcases and a laptop bag. 8 years of marriage, 6 years of fatherhood, reduced to 50 pounds of luggage. He walked into the hallway. The floorboards, which he had personally selected during the renovation, felt cold under his shoes. He stopped at Lily's door. His hand trembled as he turned the knob. The room was bathed in the soft pink glow of her humidifier. Lily was sprawled out in the chaotic shape of deep sleep, one leg kicked over the duvet, her mouth slightly open. The stuffed bear, Mr. Barnaby, was tucked under her chin. Ethan knelt beside the bed. The urge to wake her, to grab her and run, to scream that he wasn't leaving her, that he was being pushed, clawed at his throat. But he looked at her face. It was peaceful. If he stayed, this peace would end. There would be paternity tests. There would be custody hearings. There would be nights where she heard her mother crying and her father shouting. Claire had weaponized biology, and in doing so, she had taken away Ethan's ability to fight cleanly. "I love you, Bug," he whispered, the nickname catching in his throat like a splinter. "I'm doing this so you don't have to choose." He didn't kiss her. He was afraid if he touched her skin, he wouldn't be able to stand up again. He placed a small, folded note on her nightstand, not for her to read now, but for later. Just a drawing of a bridge. He was an architect. He built bridges. Maybe one day she would find her way across this one. Ethan stood up, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, and walked out. Claire was standing in the foyer, arms crossed, leaning against the wall. She looked smaller now, or maybe he was just seeing her from a great distance. "Where will you go?" she asked. Her voice wasn't triumphant. It was thin, edged with a sudden dawning realization of the void he was leaving. "Tokyo," Ethan said. He didn't look at her. He placed his house keys on the console table right next to the bowl where they kept the mail. The metal clinked, a final definitive period at the end of a sentence. "Tokyo? But that's halfway across the world." "You wanted him to be her father, Claire," Ethan said, opening the heavy front door. The damp Seattle air rushed in, smelling of rain and exhaust. "I'm giving you exactly what you asked for. Don't waste it." He walked out into the corridor and let the door close behind him. He didn't wait for the elevator. He took the stairs, descending into the dark, leaving the light behind. Tokyo did not welcome Ethan. It swallowed him. He had been in the city for 14 days, yet he still felt like an apparition drifting through the solid world of others. His apartment in Minato-ku was efficient, a stark rectangle of pale wood and frosted glass that cost as much as the mortgage on the Seattle penthouse. It was devoid of history. There were no scuff marks on the baseboards from a tricycle, no crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator, no faint scent of vanilla perfume lingering on the throw pillows. There was only the smell of ozone and the low, constant hum of the air purifier. Ethan stood on the balcony of the 24th floor. Below him, the city sprawled like a circuit board on fire. The Tokyo Tower glowed a burning orange in the distance, a beacon for millions of people going home to families, to lovers, to lives that made sense. Ethan had none of that. He had a job title, senior design lead, and a suitcase he hadn't fully unpacked, because unpacking felt too much like admitting this was permanent. His phone vibrated on the metal railing. It was the only sound that dared to compete with the city's roar. He looked at the screen. Claire. It was the 5th time she had called in 2 days. At first, the messages had been logistical. "Did you cancel the utility autopay? Where is the spare key for the garage?" But as the silence from his end stretched from hours into days, the tone had shifted. The administrative queries were replaced by a creeping panic, a sudden realization that gone didn't just mean sleeping in a hotel downtown. Message: "Ethan, pick up. Lily is asking when you're coming back for dinner. I don't know what to tell her." Ethan stared at the pixels until they blurred. The manipulation was subtle, wrapped in the guise of maternal concern. She wasn't asking for him. She was asking him to solve the problem she had created. She wanted him to manage Lily's pain so she could enjoy her new life with Julian guilt-free. He felt a phantom ache in his chest, a physical pull to type back, "Tell her I love her. Tell her I'm working." But he remembered the phrase, "real father." If he answered, he remained part of the triangulation. He remained the emotional buffer. He had to excise himself completely for the wound to cauterize. Ethan tapped the screen. but not to reply. He opened the settings menu. He routed all calls from Claire's number to a voicemail box he would never check. Then, he opened his email app. He composed a new message, addressing it not to his wife, but to the family attorney he had retained remotely 2 days ago. Subject: Communication Protocol. Body: Please inform Mrs. Caldwell that all future correspondence regarding assets or divorce proceedings must go through your office. I am not to be contacted directly. Regarding Lily, I will arrange a schedule for video calls once the initial separation period has settled. Until then, no contact. He hit send. It felt like severing a limb to save a body. Turning his back on the view, Ethan walked back into the sterile apartment. He sat at the small dining table, opened his laptop, and pulled up the blueprints for the Shibuya Chaotic Flow project. The lines were clean, mathematical, solvable. Structural integrity could be calculated here. Loads could be balanced. He worked until his eyes burned and the sun began to bleed gray light over the skyline. He was a ghost in a machine, functioning on caffeine and a cold, hard resolve. He would build skyscrapers in a language he didn't speak, because it was easier than speaking the language of a man who had lost everything. At 5:00 a.m., his phone lit up again. Not a call this time, a notification from Instagram. He hadn't blocked her there yet. It was a photo Claire had just posted. A candid shot of Julian in their kitchen, Ethan's kitchen, holding a glass of wine, laughing at something off camera. The caption read, "New beginnings and authentic souls." Ethan stared at the image. He didn't feel anger. He felt a cold, clinical detachment. He pressed his thumb against the screen, held down on her profile name, and selected block. The photo vanished. The kitchen vanished. Ethan closed his eyes and listened to the silence. It was deafening, but it was his. 3 weeks after Ethan left, the penthouse in Seattle no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a backstage dressing room after a chaotic performance. Claire stood in the center of the kitchen island, staring at the pile of unopened envelopes that had metastasized on the granite counter. With Ethan, the mail had never been a physical presence. It was dealt with, sorted, paid, filed, and shredded before she ever poured her morning coffee. Ethan was invisible labor, a silent engine that kept the machinery of their high-maintenance life humming. Now, the engine was gone, and the gears were grinding. "Julian?" Claire called out, her voice tight. "In a minute, babe. The light is hitting the canvas just right." Julian's voice drifted down from the loft upstairs, the space that used to be Ethan's home office. Julian had reclaimed it as a studio 3 days after moving in. Claire looked at the clock on the oven. 6:45 p.m. Lily was sitting at the dining table, her legs swinging restlessly, poking at a bowl of lukewarm mac and cheese with a plastic fork. "Mommy, this tastes powdery," Lily mumbled, pushing the bowl away. "It's organic, honey. Just eat it, please," Claire said, rubbing her temples. She hadn't had time to cook. The gallery was in the middle of an installation, and usually Ethan would have picked up Lily, handled dinner, and had bath time started by now. Julian bounded down the stairs a moment later, wiping paint-stained hands on a rag that looked suspiciously like one of the guest towels. He wore paint-splattered jeans and no shirt, radiating a chaotic, boyish energy that Claire had found intoxicating in hotel rooms, but found exhausting in a kitchen on a Tuesday night. "Hey," he said, coming up behind her and kissing her neck. He smelled of linseed oil and sweat. "Did you see the light today? Incredible. I think I finally broke through on the erosion series." Claire stiffened. She pulled a heavy envelope from the pile. "Julian, the HOA fee is overdue. And the private school tuition bill came today. It's a lot." Julian laughed, grabbing an apple from the bowl and taking a loud crunch. "Money, money, money. It's all just paper, Claire. Relax, we'll sell a few pieces at the opening next month, and we'll be swimming in it. Don't let the capitalist grind kill the vibe." He walked over to the table and ruffled Lily's hair. Lily flinched, pulling away. She didn't like her hair touched by sticky hands. "Hey, kiddo, you look grumpy. Where's that smile?" Julian teased, oblivious to the child's stiff posture. "Where is Daddy?" Lily asked, looking past him to Claire. "He said he would help me with the bridge drawing. For school." "I can help you," Julian offered, sitting on the edge of the table. "I'm an artist. I know way more about drawing than an architect." "Architects are just squares and rulers. Boring stuff." "No!" Lily shouted, slamming her fork down. The sound echoed in the high-ceilinged room. "Daddy draws better. He draws the inside of things." "Lily, stop it!" Claire snapped, her nerves fraying. "I hate it here." Lily slid off the chair and ran toward her bedroom. The door slammed, leaving a ringing silence in the kitchen. Julian sighed, shaking his head dramatically. "She's got a lot of repressed anger, probably picking it up from the environment. We should maybe look into some alternative schooling. Somewhere less rigid." Claire looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the arrogance in his posture, the complete lack of concern for the financial precipice they were standing on, and the dismissal of her daughter's pain. For the first time, the free spirit she had craved looked remarkably like a deadbeat. "She doesn't need alternative schooling, Julian," Claire said, her voice trembling. "She needs her father." "I'm right here," Julian said, his smile faltering. "You said I was the real one, remember? Biology, Claire. Blood calls to blood." "Biology doesn't pay the tuition, Julian. Biology doesn't remember that she's allergic to strawberries or that she needs a nightlight." Claire slammed her hand on the counter. The pile of mail slid, scattering across the floor. Julian's face darkened. The charm evaporated, replaced by the petulant sulk of a man who had never been told no. "Wow. Okay. I didn't realize I was moving in with a project manager. I'm going out for a smoke. The energy in here is toxic." He grabbed his jacket and walked out the balcony door, leaving it slightly ajar. The cold wind hissed in. Claire stood alone in the kitchen. She looked down at the scattered envelopes. One of them was a forwarded letter from Ethan's insurance company. She picked it up. It was addressed to her. "Policy update. Beneficiary change confirmation." He was erasing her. While she was drowning in the mess she had made, Ethan was quietly, methodically closing the books. She sank to the floor, surrounded by bills she didn't know how to pay, and a silence that was entirely different from the peace she had once known. The New York bar on the 52nd floor of the Park Hyatt Shinjuku was suspended in a kind of amber light, floating above the chaotic sprawl of Tokyo. Jazz played softly, a saxophone weeping low and slow, struggling against the hum of conversation from tourists and businessmen. Ethan sat alone at a small table by the window, a glass of Suntory whiskey sweating against the coaster. It had been 6 weeks, 42 days of silence. His phone, resting face down on the black lacquer table, buzzed. It was a specific vibration pattern. One long, two short. Email. Priority sender. Ethan took a sip of the whiskey, letting the burn settle in his chest before he flipped the phone over. The screen lit up his face in a harsh blue glow. From Claire Caldwell. Subject, she asked for you today. Video attachment. His thumb hovered over the notification. He knew he shouldn't open it. His lawyer had advised him to treat all communication as evidence, to archive it and move on. But the subject line hooked into the deepest part of his ribcage and pulled. He tapped the screen. The video loaded, buffering for a second on the hotel Wi-Fi before snapping into clarity. It was the living room in Seattle. The lighting was bad, shadows stretching long across the floor. Lily was sitting on the rug, surrounded by the wreckage of a Lego set. The complex Hogwarts castle Ethan had started building with her 3 months ago. In the video, Lily wasn't playing. She was sweeping her arm across the bricks, scattering them. She was crying, that hiccuping, breathless sob that used to make Ethan drop everything to hold her. "I can't do the tower," Lily screamed at the camera, her face flushed and wet. "It keeps falling. Daddy knows how to lock the bricks. Where is he?" Claire's voice came from behind the camera, ragged and thin. "Daddy is working, honey. Julian can help you." "No." Lily threw a handful of plastic bricks at the lens. "Julian smells like smoke. I want Daddy." The video cut to black. Ethan stared at the dark screen, his own reflection staring back. Tired eyes, a jaw set in grim lines. Then, the text below the video appeared. "Claire, this is what you're missing. This is what you're doing to her. I know you're angry at me, but don't punish her. Just call us, Ethan. Please, we're drowning here." Ethan's hand shook. The urge to hit the call button was a physical force, a tidal wave crashing against the sea wall of his resolve. He could fix this. He could calm Lily down, explain how the structural bricks needed to alternate. He could be the hero. But then he looked at the timestamp on the email. 2:00 a.m. Seattle time. Claire was awake, spiraling, and she was using Lily's pain as a lure. She wasn't asking for him to father the child. She was asking him to patch the holes in her fantasy. If he called now, he would be validating the dynamic that he was the safety net for her infidelity. He would be teaching Claire that she could break the family and still have him on retainer to clean up the mess. "Sir?" Ethan looked up. A waiter in a white jacket was standing there, holding a water pitcher. "Refill?" "No," Ethan said. His voice was raspy. "Check, please." He looked down at the phone one last time. He typed a reply in his head. "I'm coming home. I'm sorry." Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he deleted the draft. He forwarded the email to his attorney with a single note attached. "File this under evidence of emotional instability in the home." He locked the phone and slid it into his pocket. The whiskey glass was empty, leaving only the melting ice. Ethan stood up, adjusting his suit jacket. He felt like a monster. He felt like a man cutting off a gangrenous limb to save the heart. He turned away from the window, away from the digital ghost of his crying daughter, and walked into the anonymous Tokyo night. The silence in the penthouse was different this time. It wasn't the heavy, disciplined silence of Ethan's absence, nor the tense, walking on eggshells silence of Julian's moods. It was the hollow, echoing silence of a robbery. Claire stood in the doorway of the loft, the space that had once been Ethan's office, the space she had eagerly converted into Julian's studio. The smell of turpentine was still there, sharp and chemical, but the room was gutted. The easel was overturned. The canvases that Julian had claimed were masterpieces in progress lay slashed or scattered, rejected in a fit of artistic temper, or perhaps just the realization that he had no talent to back up his ego. But it wasn't the art that mattered. It was what was missing. Her laptop. the vintage watch Ethan had left in the safe, and the gallery's corporate credit card, which she had foolishly added him to as an authorized user for supply runs. Her phone buzzed in her hand. A fraud alert from the bank. Transaction declined. $4,200 at Delta Airlines. Insufficient funds. He hadn't just left. He had tried to burn the bridge on his way out. "Mommy?" Claire spun around. Lily was standing in the hallway, clutching Mr. Barnaby by a ragged ear. The bear looked smaller now, worn down by weeks of being the only source of comfort in a volatile house. Lily looked at the chaotic room, then up at her mother. Her eyes were old, too old for 6. "Is the shouting man gone?" Lily asked. Her voice was flat, devoid of hope, just checking the weather of her environment. "Yes, baby," Claire whispered, her knees finally giving way. She sank onto the floor amidst the ruined sketches. "He's gone." "Good," Lily said. She didn't come to hug Claire. She turned around and walked back to her room, closing the door with a soft, final click. The sound of that closing door hit Claire harder than the missing money. It was the sound of her daughter resigning herself to loneliness. Claire sat there, surrounded by the debris of her passion, and finally allowed the truth to break her ribs. There was no romance here. There was no real father. There was only a narcissist she had let into their sanctuary because she had been bored with peace. She had traded a man who would walk through fire for her family for a boy who ran at the first sign of a utility bill. She scrambled for her phone, her fingers trembling so hard she could barely unlock the screen. She didn't call the police. She didn't call her parents. She pulled up the travel app. She needed to fix this. She needed to rewind the tape. If she could just see Ethan, if she could just explain that she had been under a spell, that she had snapped out of it, he would understand. Ethan was logical. Ethan was kind. He was the architect. He fixed broken structures. She found a flight to Tokyo leaving in 5 hours, a red-eye from SeaTac to Haneda. It cost $3,000, money she didn't technically have liquid right now. She pulled another credit card, one she hadn't told Julian about, and punched in the numbers. Booking confirmed. Claire stood up. She wiped her face, smearing mascara across her cheek. She walked into Lily's room. The room was dark, lit only by the streetlights outside. "Pack your backpack, Lily," Claire said, her voice manic, breathless. "Pack Mr. Barnaby." "Where are we going?" Lily asked from the darkness. "We're going to find Daddy," Claire said, grabbing a suitcase from the closet. "We're going to Japan." She didn't stop to think that Ethan hadn't invited them. She didn't stop to consider that Tokyo was a city of 14 million people, and she didn't know his address. She only knew that she was drowning, and for 8 years, Ethan had been the only thing that kept her head above water. She was going to swim to him, even if the ocean was an entire continent wide. The lobby of the Minato Mirai office tower was a cathedral of glass and steel, designed to make humans feel insignificant. Ethan walked across the polished marble floor, his mind already dissecting the structural load of the suspended ceiling, when the rhythm of the space broke. It wasn't a sound. It was a disruption in the flow of the crowd. Near the security turnstiles, a woman was arguing with a guard. She looked frantic, her hair pulled back in a messy bun that hadn't been touched in 20 hours. She wore a trench coat that was too light for the biting Tokyo wind, and she was dragging a large, scuffed suitcase. Ethan stopped. The air in his lungs turned to ice. Claire. And clinging to the hem of her coat, looking small and gray with exhaustion, was Lily. The guard, seeing Ethan stop, looked over with relief. Ethan moved before he decided to. He walked toward them, his steps echoing with a heavy, dreadful finality. "Ethan!" Claire saw him. Her face crumpled. It was the face of a swimmer who had finally touched the wall after treading water for weeks. She dropped the suitcase handle and ran toward him, ignoring the curious glances of the salarymen streaming past. She threw her arms around him. She smelled of stale airplane air and desperation. "Oh God, Ethan. I thought we wouldn't find you. The address on the legal papers was just a P.O. box, but I remembered the company name." Ethan didn't hug her back. He stood rigid, his arms at his sides. He waited a beat, then gently but firmly took her by the shoulders and pushed her back. "What are you doing here, Claire?" His voice was low, devoid of the warmth she was seeking. "We came home," she sobbed, wiping her eyes. "I made a mistake, a terrible, horrible mistake. Julian, he's gone. He was nothing. He wasn't real. You're real. You're the only thing that's real." She turned and pulled Lily forward. The girl looked up at Ethan, her eyes wide and red-rimmed. She held up Mr. Barnaby, the bear's fur matted. "Daddy?" Lily whispered. Ethan's heart fractured. He dropped to one knee, ignoring the sharp crease it would put in his suit pants. He pulled Lily into his chest. She felt thin, trembling against him. He buried his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo that was painfully familiar. "I've got you, Bug," he murmured. "I've got you." "Are we going home now?" Lily asked into his neck. "To our house?" Ethan closed his eyes. Then he opened them, looking up at Claire over his daughter's shoulder. Claire was smiling through her tears, a look of victorious relief. She thought the bridge was rebuilt. She thought the sight of the child was the key that unlocked the door she had bolted shut. Ethan stood up, lifting Lily into his arms, but his eyes remained locked on Claire. The temperature between them dropped. "Lily is staying with me tonight," Ethan said. "I'll take her to my apartment. I'll order her food she likes. I'll let her sleep in a real bed." "Great," Claire exhaled, reaching for her suitcase. "I'm so tired, Ethan. I just need a shower and—" "You," Ethan interrupted, his voice cutting through the lobby noise like a scalpel, "are going to a hotel." Claire freeze-framed. Her hand hovered over the luggage handle. "What?" "Ethan, don't be ridiculous. We're married. We're here to fix this." "You didn't come here to fix anything, Claire. You came here because your fantasy fell apart, and you needed a landing pad." Ethan shifted Lily's weight to his hip, shielding the girl's ears slightly with his hand. "You told me she needed her real father. You were very specific. I was wrong. I was confused." Claire's voice rose, bordering on hysterical. "You weren't confused. You were cruel," Ethan said calmly. "You broke the contract of our life together. You don't get to walk back into the lobby just because it started raining outside." He pulled a credit card from his wallet. His personal card, not the joint one. He handed it to the security guard who was hovering nearby. "Please help this woman get a taxi to the Park Hyatt," Ethan told the guard in fluent Japanese, then switched to English for Claire. "I'll pay for your room for 3 nights. That's enough time to book a flight back to Seattle." "You can't do this," Claire whispered, the color draining from her face as she realized the extent of the distance between them. "I'm your wife." "You're Lily's mother," Ethan corrected. "That's the only title I recognize right now." He turned his back on her. He walked toward the elevators, carrying his daughter, leaving his wife standing alone in the center of the cold, magnificent hall. The departure terminal at Haneda Airport was a study in efficient melancholy. Travelers moved in hushed streams, the announcements chiming with a polite, robotic consistency. Ethan stood near the security checkpoint, his hands deep in the pockets of his coat. Claire stood 5 feet away, clutching her boarding pass like a lifeline she wasn't sure would hold. She looked diminished. The frantic energy of the hotel lobby had burned out, leaving behind a gray, exhausted hollowness. She had spent 3 days in the hotel room Ethan paid for, while he had taken Lily to the aquarium, to the parks, to eat red bean pancakes on a bench in Yoyogi. "The lawyers will email you the new draft on Monday," Ethan said. His voice was steady, lacking the sharp edge of anger that had defined the last week. It was just business now. Claire nodded, looking down at her shoes. "I understand. Maintenance for Lily, nothing for me." "You have the gallery, Claire. You have the house until we decide to sell it," Ethan corrected. "You're capable. You just need to stop looking for someone else to carry you." She looked up then, her eyes swimming with unshed tears. "I missed you, Ethan. Not just the money. Not just the help. I missed us. Is there really no version of this where you come home?" Ethan looked at her. He remembered the woman he had married, the woman he had tried to build a fortress around. But he also saw the woman who had looked him in the eye and told him he wasn't real enough for her child. That crack in the foundation couldn't be patched. "I am home, Claire," Ethan said softly, gesturing to the city beyond the glass walls. "I found parts of myself here that I forgot existed. I can't squeeze back into the box you made for me." He crouched down. Lily was sitting on her suitcase, swinging her legs, wearing a new cat-eared beanie he had bought her in Harajuku. "Hey, Bug," Ethan said, taking her small hands in his. "Are you coming on the plane, Daddy?" Lily asked. She didn't sound hopeful. She sounded like she already knew the answer. She was a perceptive child, sharpened by the friction of her parents. "Not today," Ethan said, his throat tightening. "I have to stay here and build some big buildings, but we have the iPad schedule, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and you're coming back for the summer, all of July, just you and me. We'll go to Disney Sea." Lily studied his face, searching for the lie, and found none. She leaned forward and wrapped her arms around his neck, squeezing with a ferocity that almost broke him. "I love you, Daddy. You're the realest." Ethan closed his eyes, absorbing the weight of her, the smell of her, storing it away to get him through the quiet nights ahead. "I love you, Lily, more than anything." He stood up and stepped back. He nodded once to Claire, a dismissal, a permission. "Goodbye, Ethan," she whispered. She took Lily's hand and turned toward the security gates. Ethan watched them go. He watched until they were just shapes in the crowd, until the back of Lily's beanie disappeared behind the frosted glass partition. He stood there for a long time, the currents of people flowing around him like water around a stone. The grief was there, heavy and sharp, but beneath it was something else, a clean, cold sense of solidity. He turned around and walked toward the exit. The automatic doors slid open, and the Tokyo night hit him. Cool, electric, smelling of rain and asphalt. He loosened his tie. He walked into the neon wash of the street, merging with the millions of other souls navigating their own broken paths. He was alone, but for the first time in years, he wasn't carrying the weight of a lie. He was just a man, walking home.